Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for Sunday, January 19th. Looking at the significant wave height chart for the North Pacific, current image, we see low pressure swell generation in the Gulf of Alaska. This from the second in a series of 3 strong storms that have occurred over the dateline. Another area of interest back here, this is to be the third in the series. Strongest of the 3. Other than that, pretty calm pattern. Looks as if high pressure still has a lock on the U.S. West Coast because of the absence of storm production here, and otherwise that's pretty much it. We'll start our tour looking at the jet stream, 250 millibar winds and height. This gives us some indication of what's going on in terms of storm production down at the surface. The jet stream is the steering current for winds and also helps add fuel to surface level storms, so it's something of interest. Coming off Japan, we have a pretty solid flow going to 190 knots over the dateline, ridging slightly, falling into a good trough north of Hawaii. You see this little counterclockwise circulation that is supporting what is currently the second storm in our series of 3 in the Gulf of Alaska. Also notice a bit of a dip here coming off Japan. This is likely going to turn into a trough and fuel the third in the series of 3 storms. Then we have the usual split jet stream pattern here. It's actually a bit east of Hawaii, so this is better than it's been in the past. The northern branch of the jet goes up into Canada and then inland. This is pretty typical of the pattern so far this year, with the southern branch going down towards the equator. All right, let's put this into motion, see how things play out. We go a couple days, a couple of slots. We're into Monday. This trough basically gets pinched off, split continues. More energy building back in the jet off Japan, though, and this continues on. We're looking at now we have 200 knot winds into Tuesday morning. Nice trough starting to dig out, same place as the previous 2 troughs before it, getting very solid indeed, fed by 200 knot winds going up the eastern flank of this trough, and that is very good for providing support for storm development down at the surface. Look at that. By Wednesday, we're into nearly 220 knot winds feeding into this trough. That's really about as good as you can ask for. Goes on into Thursday, then the trough starts pinching off. Huge split here. You notice that. So high pressure, this supports high pressure clockwise circulation down at the surface. Troubling little thing developing off Japan. Winds are backing off and the jet is becoming diffuse. We roll this out by year into Friday, and basically everything's gone in terms of storm production in the upper levels. Winds are backing off. We'll keep rolling here. And then what you see is a little bit of wind trying to get going, but here you go, the beginning of a split, a significant split well east of the dateline by a week out. So that is likely signals the end of the storm cycle. Not good. Now we go down, look at surface level winds, surface level pressure. We noticed earlier that there was inferences of low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska. Sure enough, there is actually a gale, 45 knot winds. What we're going to do here is we're going to go back in time a little bit, because this is something worth looking at. So we're into Thursday of last week. This system developed. This is the second. Here was the first in the series, but this is the second in the series. We're into Thursday and Friday. You're looking at 55 knot winds targeting primarily Hawaii. There's the Great Circle Pass, the northwest winds aimed right at the islands. We'll put this in motion. And look at that. You had 55 knot winds on Friday and 60 knot winds right there. If you notice, down Great Circle Paths about, what is that, 312 degrees, 315. Okay, and then you put that in motion. It then went up into the Gulf and tried to reorganize a little bit. This pushed swell towards mainly Oregon and Northern California, and when we get into the swell charts, we'll take a look at that. And then pretty much we are where we are today. There's the 18Z point. Okay, that one's gone. Let's put this in motion now. And here comes the next system. This is on Monday. And we'll zoom in, take a quick look here. And we are seeing, if you look in there, that's 55, 60, maybe 65 to 70 knot winds forecast. So that's quite intense, and those winds relative to Hawaii are aimed pretty much right down about the 310 degree path, rather westerly, especially for Maui. We'll put in a couple more. There you go. There's still the same sort of thing. We'll zoom in again one more time, take a look. And that is, there's your 55, 60, and it looks like there's 65 knot winds forecast. And if we do this, there you go. There's the 312 degree path aimed right down. That's into Oahu. Okay, so that's a very impressive bit of wind energy there, to say the least. Not over a large area. And there you go again, 55, 60, 65 knot. And again, coming into the maybe 315 path to Hawaii. And then it rolls out and it pretty much dies once it gets north of the islands. And if you notice, that point in time, most of the wind energy is cutting across the Great Circle Pass, aimed more towards California than towards Hawaii. Now we're going to go back. We're belaboring this point a little bit because it is kind of important. Now we'll watch the same thing with the Great Circle Paths into Northern California, and you notice a fair amount of energy is pushing that way. So swell for both Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast based on what we're seeing here. So we'll roll this on out. After this guy goes, there's this another little fetch that's now showing up, but it doesn't last long. And then after that, pretty much you got a little one. We're out into Saturday now. Not a whole lot happening, and that's the end of it. It's pretty much over. Look at that. High pressure takes over the date line, and that is not a good sign at all. So that pretty much signals the end of the swell cycle. So now we take a look at significant wave heights, and what we're going to do is actually reverse this so we can see this. This is storm number 2 in the series. This was Friday, 41-foot seas in mid-morning. A little spike here to 48 feet relative to Hawaii. Not so much on the Great Circle Pass. If you look at the arrows, the actual momentum of the seas are cutting across more towards California than towards the islands, but we already know the islands did pretty well, and we'll get into that in a minute. Continues, it pretty much died out, pushed up towards the Gulf, and but it was interesting because this little push here actually was able to get some pretty good swell pushing up into Oregon, so that was of interest. Anyway, so now we're into current. Here's where we are right now, 18Z run plus 6 hours. And all eyes are going to be on this developing news system. This is into Monday morning. Notice Monday 18Z, you're already at 46-foot seas, and then by the evening, we're into the 52 or so foot range. And this is, again, you have 60+ knot winds driving from the west. And there you go. Now we're quite solid. Let's also look at this relative to Great Circle Paths. So early on, you're in the 312, 305 range relative to Hawaii. Notice then that the energy starts cutting across those paths as this storm peaks out into Tuesday morning. So it's sort of more what I'd call sideband energy going into the islands. But relative to California, the energy is pushing almost right up like the 280, 285 degree pass into Northern California, and to Southern California maybe even a little bit better. There you go. That's the 287. It's a little north there, 288 or 289. So that looks quite impressive. Anyway, as this thing rolls out, we'll take the there's one other thing we want to look at. So let's see exactly how high these seas are. We zoom in here, and this is a bit of mirage counting, but that's 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, maybe 60-foot seas projected in the core of this storm. So that is most impressive, especially, but not unusual considering you have 65 knot winds. That's hurricane force. And again, close proximity to Hawaii. This is like in the 1,000 to 1,300 nautical mile range, but you're still several thousand miles out from California. Anyway, so we're into Tuesday. Put this into motion. The storm pretty much peters out as it gets north of Hawaii, and quick fade by Wednesday morning. It's all but gone. Now you say, there's a huge expanse of 30-foot seas, but what they really are is this is a small system, and as it ages and moves east, these are seas radiating away from the storm from previous fetch. So it gives it the impression that it's a huge system, but in reality, it's back here is what really matters. And this is really a small system that is pushing extremely hard and trying to build a footprint based on a small area of strong winds. Either way, pretty much is all gone by Wednesday night. And it's just pre-existing seas decaying, radiating away. Another system tries to come in behind on Friday, but nothing happens. And then this little thing on Saturday, which is next to nothing. And that's it for the week. So the focus, clearly, I'm going to roll this back here, is Hawaii, just due by sheer closeness to the fetch area. But as everyone probably knows at this point, the front from the storm is to sweep over Hawaii, and you're going to end up with bad winds, northwest winds for the most part. The U.S. West Coast will not suffer such a fate, but because it's so far away from the core of the storm, it's almost the opposite effect. The swell will have a lot of distance to decay, and that might hamper to a certain degree the consistency of the swell and the size, but it will be a very well-groomed swell when it shows up. So those are all good things. So just a quick look here. Swell number 2, it hit Hawaii today on Sunday. This is the evening. Here's the spectral image. Most of the energy right now is in the 14.5 range. Here is the surf height, predicted surf height based on the primary swell. The swell peaked out on Oahu. This is the Waimea Bay buoy before 18Z, so that's about it's between 7 and 8 a.m. Hawaiian time. Predicted surf based on that is about 17 foot, and we scroll down, and then it was kind of a steady decay through the day. Scroll down, examine the data. Here you go. 16Z, 1730Z. Predicted surf heights 18 foot, 11 feet at 16 plus seconds. And then if you look, it starts decaying, swell in the 8.5 at 14 to 15 second range. So, and this is about what was predicted for Hawaii. So these are new high resolution buoys working on. They're not available on the site. They're available on the mobile site. And there's a little if you dig around, you can find it there. All right, next we're looking long term. What's going on? MJO, El Nino, La Nina, Southern Oscillation Index. Numbers are through the roof high, which is not good and very unexpected. It was up to 44.71 there back earlier in the week. Still in the 20s. The average, 30-day average, is up to 6.39. The 90-day average, 4.15. All this suggests that the inactive phase of the MJO is building in. So based on these numbers, that's what you got. There's other data that says otherwise. Now here's what's really interesting. We're looking at surface level wind anomalies on the equator in the West Pacific. Based on the SOI numbers, you would expect to see raging east winds, but they're not. If anything, there's like a small westerly wind burst that is going on here, indicative of a building active phase of the MJO. So you have west anomalies in the far West Pacific, make it over the maritime continent. Then you get to the dateline, you have light east anomalies, and then pretty much neutral from there, south of Hawaii on into Central America. Next we look a week out, and we see pretty much a neutral pattern over the maritime continent, but more westerly anomalies on the dateline, and quite fairly strong even east of the dateline to south of Hawaii. And then you have these easterly anomalies south of basically California and Mexico. So what this suggests is that the active phase of the MJO is in fact building now, is supposed to continue moving east for a week and pretty much take over the West Pacific. A very different picture per these models than compared to what the Southern Oscillation Index suggests. Here is yet another view of wind anomalies. The reds are westerly anomalies. Anything above this line is what has already happened over the past, let's say, month, and then you have about about a week of forecast. What this suggests is that there has been a westerly wind burst. 120 east, that's barely, it's so far west it's barely in the Pacific, but it suggests it's there and it's about peaked out right now, and it's supposed to continue into the end of January. So this is something to be aware of. Next, we have another view of the MJO. Blues are the active phase, actually means less surface reflectivity, more clouds, which tends to be associated with the active phase of the MJO. The opposite, more reflectivity, suggests the inactive phase of the MJO. So this is the statistic model. It suggests that we are in fact in the active phase of the MJO, and that it's supposed to continue, though weak, for the next 15 days. That's good news. You look at the dynamic model. The dynamic model suggests it's supposed to actually build, peaking out somewhere about a week plus out, but still quite solid. So this is the perplexing part, is these models are all saying active phase. The Southern Oscillation Index is saying inactive phase. The jet stream is suggesting inactive phase. So everything, the numbers are very confused. And finally, we take a look at the jet stream model. Again, the blues suggest enhanced precipitation, the yellows and oranges decreased precipitation, and this runs about a week to 2 weeks ahead of reality. So this suggests that the active phase is probably somewhere in the West Pacific, moving through till about the 3rd of February. So that sort of makes sense, followed by the inactive phase, let's say in late January, going into Central America, South America into the end of February, and then a new weak active phase. So the models are sort of saying one thing, surface level winds are saying one thing. The Southern Oscillation Index doesn't seem to be getting the message. So that's a bit perplexing, but I suspect this will sort itself out in the next week. Here's a quick look, Southern Oscillation Index. You see it's going up. This is the 30-day average. We had a pretty good downward drop here earlier in December, but now we're kind of on an upward trend here in January. Not sure where it's going, but it is definitely above the neutral line, which is in inactive phase La Nina territory. Not strongly so, but that's kind of where it is. Real quick look here at surface level water temperature anomalies. Notice we have some warm water, warmer than we've seen in a while, starting to build up here off of Central America. This is where you watch for El Nino, La Nina, not so much near the coast, but kind of out in here. But what's been happening is we had a Kelvin wave. It impacted the coast, Central America or South America here, and you're starting to see warm anomalies from that Kelvin wave appear on the charts. This is good news. This will radiate this way and start filling in these cooler blotches here. We also have this cool patch that's been steadily, it's been off of California for quite a while, heading towards the equator due to high pressure. That high pressure, it appears to be breaking down somewhat. We've got warm water actually building along the coast. This long batch of warm water that's been here all fall is starting to make inroads into California. That'd be a good thing, push up the water temperatures a little bit. So all this is kind of good news. There's just a little pocket of cool water here. Not so much indicative of anything at the moment. We tend to look off of Africa too. Sometimes you get an early look at what's going on here, sort of a sympathetic flow to what happens in the same area off of South America. We notice this cool water showing up here, not so much north of the equator, but south of it. We're not sure if that's an indication of anything or not, but we're sort of keeping our eye on it. But overall, this pattern here is pretty neutral. There's nothing one way or the other. But neutral is better than La Nina. Wishing it was warmer, that would push into El Nino, that would goose up the jet stream. If you had a more active phase of the MJO going, that would impart energy to the jet stream. That would enhance storm production in the northern hemisphere. But we're not certain that any of that is happening yet. And finally, here's subsurface water temperatures. West Pacific is here, East Pacific is here. We're on the equator. It's from 2 degrees south to 2 degrees north, the average on the equator at depth. We don't care so much about this, it's the anomalies that matter. Well, we had a Kelvin wave. It radiated, created by a westerly wind burst 2 months ago or more. It pushed warm water to depth. That warm water, pocket of warm water, made it the whole way down around 150 meters into South America, is hitting South America, gurgling up, and the trades are pushing it back this way, and that's the warm water that we saw on the surface. But what's now showing up is some cool anomalies. We're not sure if that's just so much the normal after effect of the Kelvin wave, or whether there's actually a blocking cool pool starting to set up here. We're hoping that is not the case, but something to be a little bit concerned of. And finally, the Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomaly forecast. This is pretty much unchanged. If anything, it's gotten warmer than previously projected. We're into late January, neutral water temperatures. This forecast says water temperatures are supposed to go on the increase up to 1.3 to 1.4 degrees above normal by October of next year. That would be El Nino. Of course, these forecasts are highly, highly speculative until you get through the spring predictability barrier, pretty much that March to June time frame. The models have a real hard time figuring out what's going to go on from there afterwards. So take this with a grain of salt, but at least it suggests that the trend is positive. The issue here is how much of any of this can one believe. So to sort of wrap things up, the main focus for the next several days is this storm number 3, its impacts on Hawaii, its impacts on the U.S. West Coast. There's already another swell from storm number 2 that followed a similar track. That swell hit Hawaii today. It's bound in for the U.S. West Coast on Tuesday. Not a big swell, but standard sort of winter long period swell, something to ride. This is the thing to focus on. And then the next topic of discussion becomes what happens after that. Clearly there's going to be a break in the jet stream. I don't think that the models are suddenly going to say that the jet stream is going to start raging. But the question is that split in the jet going to heal? Will the active phase of the MJO take root? Will that help to produce more storms? Or is all the models more than about 2 weeks out just a bunch of hooey and none of this is going to happen and we just sort of fall back into the same pattern? Hard to say. It's pretty normal, though, that after you have a storm of this magnitude, things kind of fall apart for a little bit, and then they try to regroup. So, again, it's wait and see. The long-term outlook tends to look favorable, so that is somewhat encouraging. We could certainly use it. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Keep your eyes on the models. On this one, we'll get some real data and get that posted up at some point on the site. You can use the JSON2 data to monitor the storm's progress, and keep your fingers crossed for something good to come from it. Thanks for watching the forecast, and we'll do this again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks.